Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology, only from TenCate Protective Fabrics.
This episode of Fire Engineering Podcast is sponsored by LogRX, providing real-time accountability of all your narcotics from cradle to grave. Coming soon, LogRX will also track medical supplies, equipment, PPE, and even vehicle checks. Learn a better way to track your narcotics at logrx.com. That's LOGRX.com.
I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Fire through the roof of the fire building in the entire rear section. Now remember, given the payday, has it been accounted for? Okay. 610B, that was the day date, 610B.
I'm here, we got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Bring up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building, a lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows centered below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor, second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Hey, welcome back to the Command Post, along with our fire engineering family at fireengineering.com. Our podcast, again, called the Command Post. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good buddy, Chief John Salka. And we've got, let me see, John. I think our producer, Mark, has kind of helped finesse the schedule a little bit. And I think we're going to have the third Thursday of the month for the Command Post, which is nice for us to know scheduling wise, and for our followers, just like we've got the third Wednesday is the Hump Day Hangout that we do live as well. But it's Mark's doing some great things. Mark's been with us for such a long time, John, with fire engineering. Golly, helping with the audiobooks, helping with all the videos. The guy's he's pretty magical. He's pretty magical with everything he does. But that being said, he's a great guy and does a great job for us. So.
Absolutely. It's always good. It's always good to have the technical guys, the organizing guys for the guys like us that we're just bullshitting and talking, and somebody else is getting all the technical work done,
For the ones that don't know what they're doing.
Right.
So how's things? Let's do a little catch up here. How's things with the South Blooming Grove Fire District there in Orange County, New York, with your guys? Everybody doing good there?
Everything is everything is good, with the exception, like many other volunteer fire departments. Getting people out to runs at certain times of the day and certain days of the week is difficult. We had a run this morning that I happened to be just driving up my driveway from wherever I was. I was just coming back from an errand, and beep beep beep, the pager went off. I made a quick U-turn in my driveway, drove right down the highway. Figured, I'll definitely get there in time for the rig, and I was the only one there. Nobody else showed up. It was just me sitting at the firehouse by myself. And I heard on the radio the chief on the car 2 on the air, and he made it to the scene. It was a property damage only accident, which meant it was almost a non-emergency right from the start. We go to a lot of those. I'm not quite sure why we still do. It's more of not public relations, I guess. We're sort of helping people out of a difficult situation, even though for us it's no extrication, no crash, no real hazard there. But for the people that are having an accident, even a property damage only accident, it's probably the big event of the day or the week or the month for them, and they're happy for somebody to show up and say, "Okay, you're all right. How you feel? Do you want an ambulance? We'll get your car towed out of here or whatever." So, but back to the original point, I sat at the firehouse by myself, and then I heard Ray Phillips, young Ray, on the air. And the PD had it. They said, "No, we don't need you guys. Thank you very much." So he came back to the firehouse we put the run sheet in with our 2 names on it. And believe it or not, an hour later, we had another property damage accident. I drove to the firehouse again. I was the only guy that came in from outside. Ray was already there. He already went to the accident and came back to the firehouse. So we both got a second mark for a second property damage only accident. And that's a little frustrating, but most of the folks that are not there because they're at work up in Middletown or down in New York City or wherever it is. So it's, it is what it is, what it is, what it is. That's one of the reasons. And I hear your voice every time. Every time a run comes in, I hear you talking. You don't pick what runs. You're a volunteer fireman. If you're available, you take every run in. You don't pick the ones you like and skip the ones you don't. So I make every run all the time anyway because I'm retired and I'm home. And sometimes I'm the only guy, or maybe there's 2 guys in the front seat and I'm the only guy that jumps in the back seat and is able to do something when we get to wherever we're going to.
Well, and Tony Greco was talking about the challenges they're having in New Jersey. A lot of states are having that with recruitment and retention and getting out during the day. His son was injured at a mutual aid fire. His son's Michael's a full-time firefighter at Hackensack and chief in the volleys and responded next door and just shorthanded and then I tell you, John, I feel very guilty saying this. And then here I am in Estes Valley, Estes Park, Colorado, but the Estes Valley Fire Protection District, and they're running over each other to get into the firehouse.
Isn't that nice?
Our good friend Mike Arico, you remember Mikey? Mike was here with his wife and came up here and spent the morning, in town on Saturday and had breakfast, and we're getting ready to say goodbye to the firehouse, and we caught a wildland job, and I said, just get out of the way. I told him I would get out of the way because this parking lot is going to fill up with a whole bunch of cars pulling in here. And he called me later. He says that response, it's incredible. And I go, yeah, that was a Saturday. You ought to see it on a Wednesday. It's the same thing. So we're fortunate, but like you've always said, our hearts go out to those that are struggling, getting out the door, getting people. But it does come down to it. I think, John, before we jump into our show, or topic, actually, I should say, this is why you have to keep trying to get your newer members involved, because the guys and gals that have been there for a while, when they look at their watch and they go, I got about an hour and a half before I go to work. I don't think I can make that, that run you went on. The younger ones don't care. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to make every call they can make and they're into it and all that stuff. So I think when you look at that whole recruitment thing and getting out the door thing, if you've got a good, well-balanced roster of people that have been there for a while, but you got to figure that way to get more people in the door, even if it's only 1s and 2s at a time. The ones that want to make all the calls, so you can fill the seats up a little bit. I know it's easier said than done because a lot of people have the challenges, but it also comes down to the leadership side of things and expectations and things like that. About you've heard me say before, when I got on the volleys a long time ago, I just told the story. Actually, it's in my article for June in Fire Engineering. It was. Barney Sadowski is a retired district chief from Chicago. I think you've heard me say this before. And he handed me this remember the old Plectrons? No lights on it like that, the big box that you plugged into the wall. And he said, Lasky, I'm going to make this easy on you. He goes, because I know you're a Polak Italian, haha. He says, when you get home, plug this in the wall. He goes, plug it in the wall. It's going to go off for three different things. It's going to go off for Monday night's test night, Thursday night's drill, and for a call. You need to come up for all 3. He says, Monday night's test night, you know what? When it comes off, just come up here. There's always stuff that needs to be cleaned and checked in the firehouse. There's always something to be cleaned. Just come up here on that. He goes, drill night, you better be here drilling. And I want you to make calls. He didn't say, John, like you said earlier, hey, when the tones go off, why don't you wait and listen first and see if it's exciting and then come up for the call, because anybody can make the exciting calls. And I remember Freddie Iano, God bless him, but Freddie had like 28 years, John, on the volleys. And I was literally across the street from the firehouse. I could run through the neighbor's yard and be to the firehouse quicker than I could ever drive it. And 2 a.m. could be for just a gas leak. And I'd get there, like I could be up, dressed, run out the door, and the door would be closed in the firehouse. He'd already be there. And I don't know if he slept in the parking lot in his car or what he did, but this is a guy who did 28 years on the volleys and still made it. But it's the same thing. Let's talk about this. Same thing, John, with showing up on time, showing up early, showing up in a uniform today, training as a company officer, taking your role seriously, as a senior firefighter, understanding your impact on the department. If you're a battalion chief, you're the coach on the sidelines calling in the plays to your company officers. If you're the chief of department, you're up in the press box, and as long as we're talking football things here, calling down the plays, or just the owner just sitting up in the owner's suite, those kinds of things. But as long as we're doing this, let's talk about. Let's talk about setting the bar, if you will, setting a leadership bar, just mainly expectations. And you just did, I think you just did an article for, is it the New York Chiefs? Is that what you did on expectations?
Size Up. New York State Association of Fire Chiefs for their magazine, Size Up. Yep.
Oh, for Size Up, yeah. But
article titled communicating expectations.
Yeah, exactly. Expectations. Let's talk about that. Let's break this down. Let's be Rick and John, Chief Salka, Chief Lasky, talking to who do you want to talk to first? You want to talk expectations wise to the new firefighter or to the chief of department? Because we're going to catch everybody to. You want to start at the top or start at the bottom? Where do you want to go?
Well, go ahead. You start with the chief of department.
All right, well, let's talk about that. Let's, and let's talk about expectations for the fire chief. It's always, I said this to somebody the other day, buddy, how many times we mentioned this in class. Everybody wants to be the lion until it's time to do lion shit, right? I mean, everybody wants to be the boss until it's time to do that. And, Tim Tittle, God rest Tim, you love Tim as much as I did. Tim used to say, the best thing about being the assistant chief is I can go home and I can just go, well, call Lasky, he's the boss, and we used to say for the longest time when you're, the assistant chief and look, hardworking guys, Tim and Daryl are hard ass working assistant chiefs. I've got John and Paul who work their asses off as assistant chiefs. Don't get me wrong. But Tim would sit there and, say, well, I could just kind of pass the buck. And how many times you heard her say this, when you're the assistant chief, the buck used to stop somewhere here. But when you became the chief, it stops right here. And sometimes you have to make the hard decisions, have the hard conversations. How many times have you heard us in class, people come up saying, chiefs, we love our chief. He or she's a good, guy or gal, but they can't have that hard conversation. They're more worried about making everybody happy at the risk of not leading, at the risk of not making good decisions. And we've said this before 1,000 times. If you want to make everybody happy as a fire chief, then go sell ice cream. Everybody loves ice cream. And sometimes you have to make those tough decisions. You have to make those hard decisions. And I'll be honest with you, John, I mentioned this to two of my chiefs here. I said, I've been here 3 months. So that's given you enough time to get to know me. You and I talked about this the other day. Giving you enough time to get to know me. So there you go. You know who I am and what my expectations are, and let's start rocking, or it's time to play fire chief. And, as a boss, as the chief of department, as the person that's either been elected or selected on the career side to lead the department. And there's a lot of warm and fuzzy people out there, John, that'll tell you, we all work together. We all work in the same team, and we're all kind of equals, even though I'm the chief and all this. And, there's a point and a time where, that kind of applies, but, you're still the chief. And I'm not trying to make it sound in an arrogant way or a conceited or pompous way, but as the fire chief, like me, I work at the pleasure of my board. I work for the board of directors. That's who I answer to. That's who can keep me or not keep me. But everybody else works for me as the fire chief. And I'm not, you know what I'm saying, buddy? I'm not trying to sound like egotistical, but as the fire chief, there's a point where, you have to recognize that people need to answer to you. They need to handle tasks for you and the department. They need to handle it, like I said, assignments. this is the expectations thing. Your son's a major, a highly decorated major in the United States Marine Corps. The gunnery sergeants and the lieutenants and the captains that work under him, and James is a great leader, but I'm sure he's pretty good about, making it clear that they work for him. He's leading the way. He seeks input. He seeks the whole team atmosphere. I know him. I'm sure he's the one that'll go to the troops and say, okay, all right, let's work through this. Let's get together. Let's get the dry erase board out here, figure out how we're going to do this better, so on and so forth, and all that. But I don't think he ever lays down and says, well, we're all just going to hold hands and do and do what we got to do. There's a point where you've got to be the boss. There's a point where you got to be the leader. So some of the expectations for the fire chief is just that, is, you've got to be the boss. You've got to be the leader. You've got to have the hard conversation. You have to know how to get along politically with the elected officials, with the people in your community, with the other stakeholders, if you will, out there. I get along great with the chief of police here. He's incredible. He's a great partner. Ian Stewart, I'm so excited to be working alongside him. Jay Shields is in charge of the Rocky Mountain National Park. He's the chief ranger. He's over everything, fire and everything, but he's another great law enforcement officer, working with the U.S. Forest Service, working with all the key players and keeping those relationships going. And that's where you throw your ego out the door, and that everybody is part of that team, that unified command post, if you will. But as the fire chief, there's a point where you have to set some expectations for your people and hold them to it. And sometimes those conversations are not easy for everyone to have with their subordinates, especially when you're more into the people pleasing kind of mode instead of the leading. We're in the fire service, we're public safety professionals mode. We're not making pizzas and delivering stuff and all that. We're saving lives. We're protecting the community. We're protecting our people. We have a serious obligation as a leader, as a boss, to do the right thing for our organization. Go ahead, buddy.
And there's another point that I've observed and experienced a couple of times myself, and I think you'll agree. Like at the upper echelons of a fire department, or any organization for that matter, but we're obviously talking about the fire service here. You get the fire chief, and whatever the structure is below him, whatever the structure is that he has, assistant chiefs under him, deputy chiefs, and then it expands as it goes down to the different ranks, right? So obviously, for example, where you are now, you've got a couple of staff chiefs under you that work in the office there with you, Louisville, your previous jobs. Sometimes what happens is the chief, the singular guy at the top or gal at the top, comes up with either a new idea or an idea that they've been holding on to for a while that they want to try and initiate, or maybe even a change. They want to make a change in something, whatever it might be. And although they may be a great boss, and they may elicit information and suggestions and ideas from their staff, just like Colin Powell said, I welcome that. I welcome disagreement during the time when we're putting stuff together. But once a decision is made, I want everybody to line up behind it. Sometimes that's hard for those people. Sometimes when you have a chief that's got 35 years in a job, and he's got two assistant chiefs that each have 29 and 31. They have a lot of time too, and they're pretty senior people too, and they've been around for a long time as well. And sometimes it's hard for those people, and they have to get over it. But sometimes it's hard for those people to initiate and to go through and to enforce and pass down information or new changes or new concepts that are coming down from the chief that they really weren't with. They weren't really agreeing with. They really don't think it's a good idea, but they're good bosses and they're good leaders, and they express their differences during the development stage. But then a decision is made anyway, and the decision is contrary to what they were looking for. And most of them will still do their job and get it done. but sometimes it's hard. And you got to remember that as a chief. Sometimes you're next level people right below you who are as high in the organization as you, except for one spot, right? And they have ideas too sometimes that you might be coming up with some ideas or some concepts contrary to maybe the way they've done it. For example, your own situation. You're the new fire chief in a place that's been there for a long time, right? Imagine a new fire chief comes in to a place and he's got a lot of time and a lot of experience, but so do the people that he's coming in to be the chief for, right? And now it's like this new guy comes in with some new ideas, and sometimes the guys that have been there for 25 years going up the ranks, it's a little bit harder for them. So I'm not saying anybody would deliberately disobey or make it difficult, although I'm sure that's been done somewhere. That's just another point for the chiefs, for guys that are making changes and making things better and trying to make turnouts faster and whatever the improvement is that they're trying to make. Most chiefs make changes to make things better, right? Sometimes you got to remember that there might be a little pushback from some people in the organization that mean just as well and want just as much for things to go well in the fire department as you.
Oh, exactly. And that's why you and I have talked about it for years about, as a new fire chief, you don't go in there and blow things up unless it's a safety issue. You don't go toss the apple cart over. And that was my thing. Was I had a few ideas and talked about a few things, but I rely heavily on our staff. I guess the difficult part is, John, for some fire chiefs is, to kind of, there's times where you have to remove the emotional element of it. We've said this before: when you make decisions based on emotions, you're almost always wrong. And we're talking expectations. Selfishly, me as a fire chief, I'm expecting my staff to act like mature adults. I don't really have time for an emotional roller coaster. We've talked about butt hurt and all this stuff. Once in a while, this, you've done this in the FTNY, and you've done it at Sullivan Regola when you're fire chief, that you come in and you go, something needs to be changed. Something needs to happen, and you go, look, this is what we got to do. And how many times have you and I in our career had a boss, whether it's for me, previous bosses or city manager or mayor, or for you, big chief in the FTY, that's come down with something, and you're sitting inside your head going, this makes no sense. This is, you don't call it stupid, but you're like, this is ridiculous, But what do? We talk about be a good soldier. You go, okay, gotcha, boss. And off you do, and you head off. You don't go and you bitch and you don't complain and chit chat and whine in the hallway and, talk behind closed doors and kind of whisper and all this stuff. You go out and you do your job. And I think we've lost a little bit of that expectation wise in the fire service, that once in a while, and I used you as a reference not too long ago. I said, boy, oh boy, I said, I've watched my buddy John Salka at several extra alarm fires in New York City, and I've never seen a lieutenant or captain come up and get in his face and tell him to change and do so. I can't imagine somebody telling him, as the chief running the fire, a firefighter lieutenant come up to him, not following his orders, not taking care of business. I know how you run. You run an incredible fire ground, and when you give orders, you expect them to be carried out. And there's a reason for it. It's the whole thing about when they talked about Ray Downey. Remember with the tribute tape, John, where the guy says there were times he would throw out this order, and you're wondering, why does he want that done? That makes no sense. And 20 minutes later, that order would come into play. And I remember being a young firefighter, even being a young officer, doubting what was coming out of my boss's mouth sometimes, only later on to realize they were right. It's like how many times you ask people, have you apologized to your parents yet? My mom and dad, boy, they were so stupid. When I was a kid, I knew everything. Then you grow up and you go, oh, I wasn't that smart after all, was I? And you apologize saying, I'm sorry. But so there's a point where,
so true.
There's a point where, and I agree with you 100%. You don't go in and throw the apple cart upside down. There's a few things that you got to do to take care of stuff. I don't believe in waiting a year for a new fire chief expectation wise to go, I'll give it a year and then I'll see 12 months and I'll start making changes. There's sometimes you go in and you go, no, this has to change right now. Other stuff you go, hey, I mentioned it here. I ask a lot of whys being the new fire chief because I have to ask the whys. What I don't want is butthurt feelings when I ask the whys because it has nothing to do with anyone who made that decision, came out with that plan. I have to know why. And I'll be honest with you, John, there have been a bunch of times here at Estes Valley Fire where I've asked whys, the whys, and went, well, that makes perfect sense. Keep going. That is right on. That is that, or even sometimes where I haven't understood, why do we do that? Oh, okay. And then once in a while you get the why, you go, no, we got to change that. And then I put it on my list of 1, 2, 3s. 1 right away, 2 later on, and 3 is a nice to change later on kind of thing. But that being said, expectation wise for the new fire chief is, I think number one, I'm expecting them to take care of their people. The moment you start putting yourself, how many chiefs have we seen, John, that have put themselves in front of their people? Like they started off great. Their first 2-3 years, it was all about the department. They're doing stuff. And then year 4, it starts to be a little more about them. And year 5, 6, all of a sudden it's about them and not the department. And then they wonder why, morale has shifted or whatever. It should always be about your people. So it comes down to Chief of Department Tommy Richardson, right? He took over as Chief of Department a while back in the FDNY. And I'll never forget this, John. You and I talk about the first thing he did. He heard from his battalion chiefs about some things that weren't going right. So what did he do? He started riding shifts. He heard from EMTs and paramedics and the ambulances about things. He went and rode the chief, 5 stars, went and rode an ambulance to see what they were talking about. There's a guy who hasn't forgotten what it means to be a firefighter, what it means to be the new person or the person that's out on the streets, the working class making it happen. And I think when you forget where you came from, I think when you forget that you've got a whole bunch of people that are working their asses off for you, when it becomes all about you, the end is near. So I think it's got to be, you got to put your people first with their training, with their safety, with morale, whatever you can do to take care of your people, even at the risk of taking a hit from your bosses once in a while. I think way too many fire chiefs are giving up the ship and rolling over because they know they're afraid about losing their job with their mayor or whatever, and that doesn't work either. So expectations for the fire chief: take care of your people. Remember where you came from. It's about training your people to be as efficient, professional, and safe as they can be, and equipping them to do their jobs, and then letting them do their jobs, letting your company officers. You and I can't stand micromanagers. They kill morale, they kill an organization. Let your people do their jobs. Before we move on, what advice do you have for the chief? You've done it for a long time.
Say again.
What advice, expectation wise, do you have for the chief before we move on to the next rank on expectations? What new chief coming up behind you in FDNY, or new chief of department in South Blooming Grove after you served as chief?
There's so many different levels of chief, but like for the chief, like in a small volunteer or a career department, for the chief, one of the things that I think is important, at least from my perspective, for most of my career, which was I was a battalion chief for more years than I was anything else, but I was a captain, I was a lieutenant for a bunch of years too, and as a company officer, I like the chief to sort of keep his distance from a lot of stuff, firehouse stuff going on, firehouse decisions, kitchen discussions. I've seen some chiefs with good intentions, and we know what happens with good intentions, right? What road that paves. But with good intentions, sometimes they get too involved. Sometimes, let's just call it a battalion chief in a career department, or maybe an assistant chief or the chief in a volunteer department. Sometimes they get a little bit too involved. They get involved in every single little thing that's going on, every single decision, every single discussion, all of a sudden the chief throws his 2 cents in, or comes into the kitchen, or stop by the meeting that's going on, like you have a company officer meeting and all of a sudden the chief stops by. And that's not normally how you have it structured, Sometimes that inhibits discussion or disagreement or, things like that. So obviously the chief in every organization, every fire department, regardless of the structure or the command, the way that's laid out, I think sometimes they got to be careful just to not limit, but control, control their their input at different levels to let that happen by itself some places. Obviously in the end, the chief of a fire department has pretty much the ultimate decision at the end anyway. Say, listen, I know you guys had a meeting. I know you met with all the lieutenants and they agreed too. I know this is a very popular idea that you guys have, but you know what? We can't do that right now. And it's not going to be a pleasant discussion, and people aren't going to be happy about it. And we've talked about people not being happy, but I think from me, my personal suggestion from a company officer perspective to chiefs is sometimes just take a step back and let things develop and happen sort of on their own with the other folks, with the other players, with the company officers and the firefighters. Because amazingly, and my experience has been certainly in the FDNY, but in several other places, lots of firehouses run really, really well. Lots of fire departments run really well when the company officers and the firefighters who have a good working relationship with each other, they can manage a lot of stuff at the firehouse level without being, too closely watched or overseen by the next level of command,
Well, exactly. And sometimes to a fault of mine, I always said I never wanted to be like the fire chief I hated working for. And at one point I worked for America's Worst Fire Chief, and we weren't allowed to make decisions. We weren't allowed for him, but he would ask you, but he already had his mind made up, one of those things. He was the micromanaging, like 10-star general. And sometimes, John, I fall into that trap where I go, okay, go make it happen. And I got spoiled, in the past. I had Tim and Terry and Daryl, and I just go, make this happen, or an idea will come up, okay, take it and run with it. Go have fun. Like I wanted, I wanted a chief to say, Rick, go make this happen. I'm like, good. He trusts me. She trusts me. Off I go and I do it. And then sometimes I think that may be perceived as not giving enough direction sometimes. And I don't, it's not meant that way at all. Like you said, you've got talented people. Like I'm spoiled where I'm at right now with John and Paul. There's so much talent in those two chiefs, those two assistant chiefs. No mood swings, no, what I'm saying? They are just hard hitters. And when it comes to work, easy to get along with, just great bosses, if you will, and great partners for me. I know in the past, sometimes I've said, I've just kind of like, and people come up and go, well, I'm waiting for you to tell me. And I'm like, well, I already told you, you came up with a great idea, and I said, make it happen. Go make it happen. Come back if you have any questions. That what we talk about, that whole empowerment thing. But so a lot of expectations for the chief, more than we can cover in our show. Let's move it down to the company officer before we get to the firefighter, to the senior firefighter. So let's put our battalion commander from the 18th Battalion in the Bronx helmet on for John Salka. And you're talking to your lieutenants and your captains in the 18th. Expectations, you're having your officers meeting with them, kitchen table talk, or talking to a new company officer. Let's do that, because I don't think you ever had to have that talk with Joe Precipio, or Mike Scotto. But what would you say to, maybe let's just make it easy. What would you, expectations wise, to your new lieutenant or your new captain?
And that's a great way to look at it, a great perspective. What do you say? What kind of direction or instruction or suggestions do you give to the new company officer? And I like to say company officer because in the FDNY, a new lieutenant is genuinely, literally a new officer. And a new captain is not. A new captain might have been a lieutenant for 5 years or 7 years. He may be an experienced officer already, even though he hasn't been a captain yet. We know that there's additional responsibilities there. But, when you meet or interview or stumble upon or just maybe happen to work one night with a new officer, I've had many discussions with new officers about, what I like to see in my battalion. I'm not changing any department rules or policies or anything like that. But most of the time, I just have a discussion or answer questions or make suggestions about routine stuff. About, we talk about roll call at our company officer academy all the time, about conducting a roll call. For a new officer, that's a new thing. Even though they might have attended roll calls for 15 years as a firefighter with great officers, suddenly now they're in a seat, and suddenly they got to produce the roll call. They got to deliver the roll call. I talk about that. I talk about in a much bigger way, a much bigger topic, I talk about you got the shift. You're the lieutenant of 58 truck. You got 58 truck for 15 hours. You got 58 truck for 24 hours, whatever it is. I, meaning the battalion, I want you to handle that. Whatever comes up, I want you to handle it. I want you to make every run with you guys. I want them to turn out quickly. I want everybody to look reasonably well in uniform, and I want everybody to be wearing the proper equipment at every fire. I've had to tell officers at the scenes of on a run, not a job, maybe a smoke alarm or a gas leak. I've had to tell officers, could you have you guys get dressed, please? You know, which is ridiculous. Companies that weren't in my battalion that I took runs in with, they were on my assignment. They were on the box with me, and they go in the other direction when we go 10-8. They're not mine, but I would say something because that's operational. So that's the second point. You know, handle it. You're the boss now. And I don't mean you're the boss, push everybody around and make all sorts of demands. I mean, this is your shift and your crew and your rig and your 5 guys, and I want you to handle it. I'm not saying don't call me. I'm saying call me if you need help with something, but try and figure stuff out yourself, number one, and try and manage things yourself, you know. And if you're a new officer, whether it's a new officer that you were a fireman 6 months ago and now you're a lieutenant, or you could be a new officer in 58 truck that transferred from 302 engine out in Queens where you worked for 5 years. And it may be, it will absolutely be different in the Bronx than it was in Queens or than it was in Manhattan. Every borough, every battalion, the boroughs are like different fire departments, frankly, in the FDNY.
Right.
So that's one of my big points is handle it. You know, you got the job, handle it.
Well, and heck, your battalion where you were at, that was like being a battalion commander. You were like the chief of your own fire department there with all your companies because you ran the show there. You know,
I tell people that all the time. I was like the chief of the department of a 6-company fire department, 3 stations and 1 chief. Now, the only difference is every run I went on had at least 2, 3 companies from the neighboring battalion on the alarm with me, right? So it wasn't like I only went to runs with those 6 companies. And frankly, 48 engine and 56 truck, which is where I was the captain, we rarely ran in with them. They were in my battalion. I would stop there for drills and for meetings and for inspections and stuff like that and visits. But I really went on runs with them because geographically they were just a little bit farther away. And it had no impact on anything. And the FDNY, when you go out on a run, whoever the 3 engines and 2 trucks are, they call you, you call them, they do what they're supposed to do, and the job is done. There's never an issue like, oh, we do things differently in the 17th than we do in the 18th, you know. But that was always an important point that I let company officers know, particularly new young lieutenants, that just make sure everybody knows that you're the boss without waving your collar pins around. Act like a boss, look like the boss, talk like the boss, and suddenly people are going to treat you like the boss, right? And another important thing for company officers to remember is, they have these different arenas, these leadership arenas, you know, like you have these folks that are working for you, these firefighters that are working for the lieutenant. And then a lieutenant's got this battalion chief and this deputy that he's working for on the same shift at the same runs, you know, and sometimes you're looking down and sometimes you're looking up, and you got to remember who you're talking to, because those are 2 different groups of people. In one relationship, you're the superior and you're talking to your subordinates, and then the battalion chief calls you and suddenly you're the subordinate, you know, answering to your superior when he calls you up looking for something, or when he gives you a assignment, at an alarm or at the scene of an emergency. So company officers, when I'm interviewing or talking to a new young company officer, I always like to tell them, be squared away, be organized, plan your shift, know what you're doing. And of course, expectations is you got to let your people, that roll call is the official function of expectations, right? Let everybody know what's going on. How you guys doing? I'm Bill Bradley. I'm from Brooklyn. I never worked in the Bronx before. So if I'm going the wrong way or doing the wrong thing up here, give me a hint, let me know. But other than that, here's what I want to do today. I want to try and get this done and this done. And I see up on the desk upstairs in the book, we got to go to the Rock this afternoon too. So I don't know if that's good news or bad news to you guys, but I certainly want to do it right, and I want to get out there nice and early. So organize with the truck, and let's see if we can get the meal in early. And anybody has any questions, let me know. And it can be a pretty simple conversation, and most folks are going to get the gist of what you're looking for.
Well, and last thing I want to add to that, that's all perfect. I love what you said. a great message there. Is the only thing I could probably add to that too, and you kind of explain this as well, is I also need my company officers to be able to once in a while have, again, I'll say it again, have that kind of hard discussion once in a while with a firefighter, with a subordinate about, like you said, having their PPE on, having their tools in their hands, showing up early, all those things, training, the right attitude, and so on and so forth. And we've said this before, the whole buddy to boss thing. Sometimes it's a hard shift for a firefighter that's going up to lieutenant or company officer, that first jump. Now you're like you said, you're not in the club anymore. You're in charge. You're not up there. What do you always say? You're not up there just to beep the horn. And I've got two captains here. I've got three captains, well, four captains, but all four of them with slightly different personalities. But I've watched them already make some. I've seen them run fires and run incidents and things like that, and they do spectacular. But I've watched them handle some tough situations, and in one case, a disciplinary issue, and I was very proud of them, John. They didn't, like you say, fold under the pressure. They did their job. They stuck to their guns. They knew what they had to do, had to be, what they were dealing with had to be corrected. And I'm proud of them. They showed me a lot leadership wise. And I've said this before. You have as well. Anybody can run the fire you got right in front of you. And you can pull up and, get your crew to stretch a line, all that stuff. It's all the other stuff that we do that adds up back in the firehouse. It's the subhead for our leadership book, from the firehouse to the fire ground. All the things back in the firehouse, dealing with disciplinary issues, coaching, counseling, leadership, team building, all the different things together that have to happen. So, all right. So next, let's talk briefly about expectations for the senior firefighter, and then we'll get to like the rookie. You're talking to your probie coming in the door. So you've had some great senior firefighters. I've had some great senior firefighters, Seth Taylor, Gary Apple. Oh my God, there's been some great firefighters in our lives. Let's talk about the expectation you have for the senior guy, the senior gal, the senior firefighter in your firehouse, whether it's at the Valley Place or in the Bronx. What are you expecting from that senior firefighter? Granted, they don't have to have 35 years as a firefighter. We know that, but what's Chief Salka expecting?
My experience in the FDNY and here in South Blooming Grove and other places that I've either volunteered at or that I know folks that are in other departments that have things set up well, properly. Senior firefighters, obviously in a career department, you can tell by the way people are dressed for the most part, if the guy's an officer or a firefighter. In a volunteer, maybe not. Drill night in South Blooming Grove, everybody's just wandering around with their street clothes on, whatever they were wearing that day, T-shirts and jeans and stuff like that, right? So I always like to say a good, really squared away senior firefighter, if somebody came in from the outside, one of your buddies, a firefighter from somewhere else, and was hanging out with you, and you were showing them the apparatus floor, and people were moving around doing things and getting stuff done, a good senior firefighter could, and I think should be acting and talking, should be mistaken for an officer sometimes. The way they perform and the way they act. It's almost like they're a junior officer. It's almost like the actual officer is the officer, and they're like a non-commissioned officer, like a sergeant or something, because they really do. They take on almost all the senior firefighters that I've ever had in any company I worked in as an officer. Almost all of them took on a lot of the roles, a lot of the duties of the company officer in their absence. The officer may be upstairs, or I might be up in the office, and I walk downstairs and I see that the senior guys already got the guys doing what I mentioned in roll call 3 hours ago. I mentioned the roll call after lunch, guys. We got to get that hose washed and rolled and folded and put away or whatever it is I wanted to get done, right? So we do lunch. I go upstairs. All of a sudden, I walk downstairs to get a cup of coffee, and there's 20 rolls of hose out on the apparatus floor. The rig's parked outside, and my senior guys got everybody doing what I was coming down to tell everybody, let's start doing, right? Because he's a step ahead of me, and he's on the same page, and he's got the same priorities and values and priorities. So that's always good when, now you can walk into a place that's already got well established, senior people, or senior people sometimes, become senior people with you, and you get to help break them in, and they're a lot like you. Either way, I've had wonderful. I really haven't had a bad experience with senior firefighters anywhere. Once in a while, I think there might be a senior firefighter maybe that takes it one step too far, and the boss might say, "Hey, Tommy, no, we're not going to do that. All right, I appreciate you doing that, but I don't think I've seen that happen maybe more than once or twice in 33 years. Most of the time, senior firefighters know right where their limit is, right where they can get stuff going on their own without maybe giving the boss a tickle and saying, Hey, Lou, we're going to get that host thing going you mentioned this morning, And you might say, "Oh, good, Billy. I was just coming down. All right, we already got the hose rolled out." So senior firefighters are very, very important. And like you said, they don't actually have to be senior in the way of 19 or 29 years. You might be the guy with 7 years on the job, and you might be the senior guy in your crew, So senior people are real important, and they get a lot of work done. They make the work of the company officer. I don't want to say easier because I hate that word, easier. They make the work of the company officer go more smoothly, and they sort of grease the rails,
Well, and you and we play to this a lot when it comes to the senior firefighter, because I don't want to say it's a forgotten art, because maybe it's not an art, but it's a position within the fire service that we need to visit more on. We need to emphasize more on. We need to recognize more on, because the senior firefighters, we call them also our go-to guys and gals. They're the movers and shakers, man. They're, like you said it. You come down to the floor, they're looking at you smiling. Here comes Captain Salka, and they're like, they just can't wait to tell you, "Yeah, it's already done, Cap. It's already done, Cap. It's already done, Cap," because they're dialed in, and all the problems going on the floor.
I love that. I love that when you come down and say, "Okay, guys, we're going to take a look at that new hearse tool now, Cap. Sorry, but we just got done. We already took care of that."
We got done. Or they come up and how many times they knock on the door? They're dealing with a personnel issue. They're dealing with some disciplinary issue with a younger firefighter. And we'll finish up with this on the senior firefighter. There is more stuff that is taken care of on the firehouse floor that company officers and battalion chiefs have no idea. And I'm not talking illegal and proper stuff. Senior firefighters are taking care of more stuff for you. It's like when I said earlier that as a fire chief, you need to recognize that if you're successful, it's because of your people. Same thing when you're on shift or at your volley place. That senior firefighter is making it, man. They're the ones, he or she's the one that's making for, they're the challenge coin. There you go. There's the challenge coin, the senior firefighter challenge coin. They're the ones that earned it. They should be handing them out going, yeah. So that last one here, we're going to touch on expectations. We've been talking setting the leadership bar and expectations, because we're always talking about the future. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on the brand new firefighter, but for the company officers, senior firefighters, to me, we've talked about this plenty of times with that new firefighter, explain what's expected. I know this isn't necessarily the leadership side of things, but you hinted at it already. I need you to be here early. I need you to leave here late when you can. I need you to be up first, last one to bed. You should be cleanest of all time. You should be zipping your mouth and listening more than you talk. You should ask good questions. You should be learning something. Pay attention to the senior members, the quote-unquote dinosaurs that we've always talked about, that the smartest people in the world are still studying. So there's a message for you. Pay attention. Listen to the ideas. Don't think you knew everything. Our good friend and mentor, God rest his soul, Leo Stapleton, and his 30 years on the line book, John, remember he had a chapter that said, being the new lieutenant, and he had a young firefighter come into his firehouse, get assigned to him. And the first question he asked himself, was I that smart when I walked in the firehouse? Because this young firefighter came in knowing everything, and he had to tune him up a little bit in a good way to bring him back down, saying, "Kid, you just started. You and I have been doing this. You've been doing this 50 years. I've been doing it 45. And you and I pride ourselves on the fact that we learn something every single day about this job. Every day we learn something. We don't wear our hearts on our shirt sleeves. We don't get emotionally, butthurt when things don't go right or people, whatever. We lead with passion. We're professionals. I like when you said it. I'm going to go back to, I know you hate the word easy. I don't like it easy any more than you do. I think we like to use the word quicker instead of easily or easier. And we like to use the word efficient more than, than easily. Easier a lot of times means you're cutting corners and you're shorting everything. And in the long run, I think it doesn't pay off. We've said before, if you want something to be easier, it takes training, it takes muscle memory. Training brings muscle memory, which brings efficiency, which brings speed. But those that are always trying to seek the easy way out are the ones that are going to fail. So, John, let's recap. We talked about the chief, and look, 45-minute show is not long enough to talk about all the expectations that we have for those that work with us and around us. And I will say it for us. Nobody should be taking what I said at the beginning the wrong way. If you know me, I've always been referred to. I'm one of the most flexible fire chiefs in the world. As long as you do your job, as long as you work hard, as long as you love the job and take care of your people, check your ego at the door. But as a fire chief, number one, we talked about you got to take care of your people. Remember, it's not about you, it's about them. When you start placing your priorities, your image, your stuff in front of your people, the end is near. You need to tidy up your resume because you're going to be out the door pretty soon. It's always about your people. It's always about the department. It's always about the public. We've talked before about in our battalion chiefs class, John, about dealing with superiors. The Grace Hopper quote we use, respect is a two-way street, loyalty up, loyalty down, care for one's crew, respect for one's superiors. And that's how you have to work it. You're the chief of department. You've got to take care of those you answer to. Like I said, I have my board I answer to. You have to take care of those that work with you, believe and work in that around that word empowerment. Don't micromanage. You said it as a battalion chief, talking to your company officers. You went through expectations, want your company officers to get with the men and women, turning out quick, being dressed with their tools in their hands, training, rigs checked, everything else, firehouse taken care of, all those different things that we expect from our company officers. I'm only going to say this about the recap about the senior firefighter. You and I say it all the time. It's an overlooked, incredible thing that we should be paying more attention to. It's an invaluable position within the fire service, both volunteer and career. And then that rookie firefighter, that probie, be a student of the fire service, be the kind of rookie or probie that the other shifts are jealous of, be the one that won't take a break. And when you're ordered to take a break, you'll take it, but you won't sit down. You're cleaning, you're reading, you're learning, you're asking questions, you're being respectful. Know that there's been a couple hundred years of people before you that have worked their asses off to get the fire service where it's at. And we all need to be the gatekeepers, to be the custodians of what people before us have forged. Any closing thoughts, buddy, on expectation? Like I said, let's call this one. I made a little note before because we never write stuff down. Setting the leadership bar, expectations. What closing thoughts, buddy?
Well, we bring it up and we keep mentioning the Company Officer Academy, our class that we give, how well received it is. And people come up after the class or even weeks later, sending us either emails or text messages saying, some of the points you guys brought up or this point or that point. Sometimes they'll highlight or identify a particular point or a concept that we stress. And, expectations is gigantic. Expectations is gigantic. I remember being a young firefighter. I was never really a senior firefighter, but I remember being a young firefighter and then a guy with a couple more years working in the rescue. And whoever you were working for, whether it was Pete Lund or Captain Billy or whoever it was, Marty McTeague, you knew what that boss wanted. Some bosses wanted something a little bit different than others. Some guys were a little bit more serious about turning out quick, and some guys were, you got to wear the right uniform all the time. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. But you knew what the expectations were. And once you knew it, you weren't happy. You were thrilled. You were thrilled to comply with that. I loved making my bosses happy. You know what I'm saying? And I wasn't a butt kisser or nothing like that, but I always wanted to make my boss happy and made for a better shift. It made for a better atmosphere in a firehouse. And maybe you get the irons instead of getting the roof, stuff like that. So it was expectations is a preeminent, a very important point for good shift work and good fire department morale. Absolutely. Like I said, John, we could spend literally hours talking about expectations within all the different ranks.
I guess if we just finish things out here, you know what? If you love the job, if you love being a firefighter, if you have the ability, look, everybody's got an ego, but if you got the ability to check your ego at the door, place the fire service first. What's it? The mission, the men and me. The mission first. Your men and women.
I love it.
Your men and women, and then yourself. I think you'll do good. Hey, if they want to get a hold of you, John, best email. We throw this out there all the time.
Chief John Salka at gmail.com.
And I'm Chief Lasky at gmail.com. I'll always throw this out there. If you're ever at Estes Park, stop by. The coffee pot's always on. Let me know when you're coming to town. We'd love to show you around. We've got the third Thursday now for the Command Post, our podcast on fireengineering.com, as well as John and I and Chief Scott Thompson of the county and Chief Paul Capo, my ops chief from the Fire, Paulie. We've got the third hump day of the month on Wednesdays, which is live, and you can catch it later on. They're all on YouTube. Or actually, folks, you're already at fireengineering.com. Go up to the menu bar up top. You can look up every Command Post show that John and I have done, and you can look up every hump day that we've done. We've been doing it for years, and go back and take a look, take a list, and spread the word. We end all of our shows with a very important statement. That is, please keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And please remember, never forgetting means just that, never forgetting. We'll catch you next time. God bless you and be safe.
I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Fire through the roof of the 5 million in the entire rear section. Now remember, given the payday, has been accounted for. Okay. 610B, that was the day date, 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows centered below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretched, fire on the 4th floor. Second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology, only from TenCate Protective Fabrics.
This episode of Fire Engineering Podcast is sponsored by LogRX, providing real-time accountability of all your narcotics from cradle to grave. Coming soon, LogRX will also track medical supplies, equipment, PPE, and even vehicle checks. Learn a better way to track your narcotics at logrx.com. That's LOGRX.com.